What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we wanted to talk to you about using some cardio machines for athletes and how we use our assault bike for power production. So hopefully this is helpful. We get a lot of questions about this topic. So if it is helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. We post new videos every Tuesdays and Thursdays, so make sure you're subscribed to catch all of them. So when it comes to cardio equipment for athletes, right, you hear a lot about the treadmill. There's a bunch of other things, right, like the curve. We used to call it the hamster wheel in college, the one that's kind of a curve, and it's you run and you create the resistance by you running. It's not like a traditional plug-in treadmill. We use the assault bike, there's stationary bikes, rowers. There's a lot of different pieces of equipment that you can use for athletes. So I want to preface this by saying, if you follow us on Instagram, you will have seen our post from today. And I talk about this a little bit. For every piece of equipment we use, there's going to be some limitation, right? So for the assault bike, for example, or the stationary bike, or even the rower, there's some limitation because for the assault bike, let's say, we are partially sitting down. So that kind of shuts off our posterior chain. We know that with sports that involve running, hip extension, posterior chain are massively important. So it's not identical, right? With the rower, the same thing. With the treadmill, it's the same thing because you don't have that freedom to kind of go where you want, right? You have to stay in. We know a lot of the times it messes with people because it is narrow. It is really harsh to run on. Same thing with the curve, right? It's not true to just going out there and sprinting. So there's a lot of things you can do. Doing timed sprints are super awesome to just measure that absolute power production. But right here, so we got an assault bike. We actually just got it, so we're kind of low-key obsessed with it right now. But when it comes to using it for athletes, I like to really use it to measure power production. So on the assault bike, there is one of the measurements of watts. So that's pretty much measuring work output, just the amount of work being done, right? So the harder you ride, the more force you're putting in, the faster you're pulling, the greater the watts, right? So when it comes to our athletes, I find an allotted time, for example, usually I've been doing like 15 seconds of work with the 5-second fly-in. So we go 5 seconds of getting your stride and then 15 seconds of absolute work. So it allows them to reach that peak, see if they can sustain it for a little bit, and then, it kind of dwindles off. It's very hard to sustain that peak force output for a very long time. So the goal here is to see, number one, can we increase our watts? Can we increase that peak, that work output that we are creating? Number two, can we sustain it for longer, right? So we have some athletes who, let's just say they can get to like 790, right? But it hits real quick and then they immediately drop. We have others who can hit 790, they can stay within 790, 750 for 3-4 seconds, and then it slowly stops. So what we want, right, we want to increase that number we can get to, and we want to also increase the length that we can stay around there. We want max power output for a longer distance, right? Like if we're doing a max sprint, for example, let's pick soccer, right? We want to be able to keep our max speed for as long as possible. So doing something like the assault bike, I can measure what the watts are, how long they're there, what they're getting to. It's also a great tell of, fatigue and how long an athlete can work at their max. So if I have someone who, they hit their peak really fast, but after like 7 seconds, it's just boom, like they stop. They can't even be remotely similar to their peak, right? Then that can tell you a lot about the type of training program you need to do. If they can go and they're not really gassed, but they can't get super high up, that also can give you an insight in what you need to do. So I really like using it for our intermittent athletes. It is a gauge that you can use in the future. You can test it every now and again, see what that peak power is. But remember, everything does have a limitation. Even if we're doing like a landmine bar, you hear me talk about this all the time, like a landmine split jerk, for example, there's that limitation of you have to slow down at the top or else the bar is gonna fly out of your hand, right? If we're doing a sled sprint, there is that limitation that you're not using your arms unless you attach it to your back, okay? So everything has limitations. Timed sprints are probably one of the best things we can do, but if we don't have that ability, definitely something like the assault bike can really show you that work. I like how it also involves the arms. And there is many things you can do for cardio with it as well, right? We all know our intervals. So it's a very great tool to use. And when we are trying to increase that power production, we can use it to measure watts and stuff like that. So hopefully that helps. Like I said at the start, we do get a lot of questions about cardio for athletes, and if we measure like power production, how we can do that, if getting pieces of equipment are beneficial, like a treadmill, like an assault bike, stationary bike, those things. So I kind of wanted to explain that and why we have an assault bike. So hopefully this helps. Please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.